Aloha. Welcome to Church of the Holy Cross, United Church of Christ in Hilo, Hawaii. It's Wednesday morning, and that means it's time for a song from Church of the Holy Cross. My name's Eric Anderson. I'm the pastor here, and I am delighted to share this time with you. So this is a song that I have sung during these Wednesdays before, but it has been a while. And this song takes a little bit of background explanation. For one thing, it's the story of Abraham. And Abraham was a man who lived with a lot of promises being given, but relatively few of those promises were promises that he would see in their fulfillment. And that's because a lot of those promises were promises that, in fact, were directed towards much later in history, that is far beyond the span even of the long life that Abraham had. And so therefore, the other thing that occurred to me about this is that Abraham ended up living for much of his life on the seventh chord. Now, that's a musical term, and that's the only musical term I'm going to inflict on you because I don't actually know that many. But the thing about a seventh chord is that it feels like it ought to be moving to somewhere else. I mean, here is a D chord, and here's a D seventh chord. And you just sort of listen to that chord and listen to that chord and listen to that chord, and what you really want for it to do is move to resolve itself on the G. And I think for Abraham, much of his life felt like being here and wanting to be here. Well, that's also a pretty good description of life in a global pandemic, isn't it? So, with no further ado, by faith, Abraham. By faith, Abraham set out for a place away to the south, for out of God's mouth came, put on your bold face, you're receiving grace. By faith, Abraham set out on the way. Now where he would go, he didn't know. A tent was where he'd stay. He'd wonder and he'd pray. By faith, Abraham heard he'd be a miracle dad. By faith, Abraham and Sarah had a lad. By faith, Abraham and Sarah looked to the stars. By faith, Abraham and Sarah said, these grandchildren will be ours. By faith, Abraham saw a city bright. Now perhaps he would grin, they related to again, as he blew out the light in his tent each night. By faith, Abraham trusted in the Lord, though he'd never see these things it would be. He raised his heart skyward, he lived on the seventh chord. By faith, Abraham lived on the seventh chord. By faith, Abraham trusted things would be. By faith, Abraham lived on the seventh chord, lived on the seventh chord. Oh, he lived on the seventh chord. Abraham, 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 by faith. Well, we're all living on a seventh chord, looking for things to resolve, and aware that we are living in a far more complex symphony than this fairly straightforward little song. And so there's all sorts of difficult chords and transitions that are still ahead before we find a resolution. And, of course, there's also some sticky chords and some dissonant chords and some seventh chords and some resolutions that lie even beyond that. I'm glad that you could be with me for this song from Church of the Holy Cross, and I hope that it gave just a little bit of a lift to your soul in the midst of your own seventh chord. Just to let you know, we have worship coming this Sunday at 10 a.m. It is a communion Sunday, so if you are planning to worship with us, then have some bread and something to drink handy to take part of that section of the service. Also, I will note that from last Sunday, we had a technical problem. This has unfortunately been way too common in our streams of late, and we do think that we've got a solution, so we're hoping that we're not going to have the same problem again. But if you go to the page at holycrosshilo.com in the worship section and look for October 31st, you will find two video links. The first link covers the service up until the point when we had the failure. The second link is the rest of the service. And this is important because Sunday was the day that we were recognizing, remembering, honoring, celebrating, and giving thanks for those people who had been the saints in our lives. And we really want to give you an opportunity to be comforted by that worship service. So, holycrosshilo.com, look for worship from October 31st, and there are two videos on that page, and you'll find the sermon, etc., on the second of the two videos. Okay. Whenever we are next together, whether it be in this virtual sharing time or whether we are gathered together somewhere. Until that may be well, be joyful, and may your seventh chords come to a blessed resolution. Aloha.